I had never lived alone before. It was terrifying at first, waking up to silence, making my own meals, paying my own bills. But it was also the most freedom I'd ever felt. For the first time, I could be myself without worrying about who was watching or what someone might say. No parents checking my phone. No nosy neighbors asking why I didn't bring a girlfriend home. Just me, my little apartment, and the quiet thrill of starting over. I wasn't out to everyone, not fully. There were people I trusted, friends I knew wouldn't judge me, but for the most part, I still kept parts of myself hidden. Not because I was ashamed, more because I wasn't ready. I was still figuring things out. Still learning how to look at another guy and not feel like I had done something wrong just for noticing him. The apartment wasn't fancy. A small living room, a kitchen that barely fit 2 people, 1 bedroom, and a bathroom with a leaky faucet I couldn't fix no matter how many times I tried. That's how he came into my life, through a broken sink and a desperate Google search. I remember the call clearly. "Hi, this is Arjun from Prime Fix. You called about the sink." His voice was calm, deep, not rushed. I told him yes, that I really needed someone to come by soon. He arrived within an hour. I opened the door and saw him standing there, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a simple white t-shirt and jeans that looked like they had seen better days. He smiled when he saw me, eyes crinkling slightly at the corners. "Hey," he said, "you must be Aditya." I nodded and stepped aside to let him in. He moved around the apartment like he owned it, checking the sink, testing the water pressure, muttering to himself as he worked. I hovered nearby, mostly out of curiosity, partly because I didn't know what else to do. "You live here alone?" he asked after a while. I nodded again. "Yeah, first time." He glanced at me, amused. "And you already broke the sink?" I laughed nervously. "I swear it was like this when I got here." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Relax, I'm kidding." There was something about the way he said it, so easy, so natural, that made me relax a little. We talked while he worked. Nothing too deep, just casual stuff, where I was from, what I did for work, how long I'd been living alone. He listened more than he spoke, which was rare. Most people jumped in with their own stories the second you started talking, but not him. He waited. He nodded. He actually seemed interested. When he finished, he wiped his hands on a rag and handed me a card. "If anything else breaks, just call," he said. I took the card, reading the name again. Prime Fix, Arjun Patel. Asterisk. I smiled. "Thanks. No problem." He paused, then added, "You seem like you're still getting used to all this." I shrugged. "Feels like I'm pretending I know what I'm doing half the time." He grinned. "That's normal. You'll get the hang of it." I watched him walk out the door, feeling something strange in my chest, something warm, something unfamiliar. I told myself it was just gratitude. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I told myself I wouldn't call him again so soon. It felt too obvious, too eager. Like I was giving away something I wasn't ready to admit, not even to myself. But a few weeks later, the sink started leaking again. Or maybe it never really stopped. I wasn't sure. What I was sure of was that when I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the card he gave me, my heart beat just a little faster. "Prime Fix," his voice came through the speaker, familiar and steady. "Hey, it's Aditya. The sink's acting up again." There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "You're lucky I like fixing things." I smiled without meaning to. He arrived within the hour, just like before. This time, though, I didn't hover awkwardly in the kitchen. I offered him water. He took it, thanked me, and sat on the couch for a second before getting to work. "You know," he said, looking around, "this place is starting to feel like home." I raised an eyebrow. "Because you've been here twice." He grinned. "Twice is enough to notice how someone lives." I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but it made me feel seen in a way I wasn't used to. We fell into conversation easily. He asked about my job, and I told him I worked at a small design firm downtown. I asked about his, and he said he had started Prime Fix after realizing no one in the area fixed things the way they should be fixed. "Most people just patch things up," he said. "I like making them new again." I liked that about him, the way he cared about doing things right. As he worked, I found myself watching him more than I probably should have. The way his muscles tensed when he tightened a bolt. The way his shirt rode up slightly when he reached for something. The way his hands moved with quiet confidence, like he knew exactly what he was doing. I looked away quickly every time he caught me staring. At some point, I mentioned how hard it was adjusting to being alone. "I mean, I wanted this," I said, sitting on the edge of the couch while he fixed the pipes under the sink. "The freedom, the space. But sometimes it feels empty." He paused, glancing at me. You'll get used to it. I hope so. He wiped his hands and stood up. You don't have to pretend here, you know. You can just be yourself. I blinked. What do you mean? He shrugged. You talk like you're always holding back. Like you're waiting for someone to judge you. I didn't answer right away. Because he was right. I cleared my throat. It's just hard to let go of that fear, you know. Even when you're alone. He nodded like he understood. Maybe that's why I like fixing things. It's easier to fix what's broken than to keep pretending it's fine. I watched him carefully. There was something in his tone, something softer, almost personal. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. You don't have to pretend here. No one had ever said something like that to me before. No one had ever made me feel like I could just be, without explanation or apology. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was something between us. Something real. Something I wasn't ready to name yet, but still felt all the same. It started happening more often. Something would break. The light switch in the hallway, the door handle in the bathroom, even the AC unit one hot afternoon, and I'd call him. Every time, he answered on the first ring like he had been waiting for me to say something. And every time, he showed up with that same calm smile, that same quiet confidence, like fixing my problems was just another part of his day. Except it wasn't just about fixing things anymore. We talked more now, longer, deeper. He didn't just ask about what broke, he asked about me. How my week had been. If I was sleeping okay. If I still felt like I was pretending. I found myself looking forward to his visits more than I should have. One afternoon, while he was replacing a loose ceiling fan, I sat on the couch watching him. His shirt clung slightly to his back from the heat, his arms straining as he worked above his head. I tried not to stare, but it was hard not to notice how strong he looked, how focused, how present. He glanced down at me, catching me mid-stare. You keep watching me like that, and I'm gonna think you hired me just to look at me, he teased. I felt my face burn instantly. No, I stammered, flustered. He laughed, shaking his head. Relax, I'm kidding. I looked away quickly, heart pounding. Why did he always know exactly how to make me feel like I was standing too close to a fire? Later, after he finished, we sat on the couch together. The room was warm from the sun streaming through the windows. He kicked off his shoes and leaned back like he belonged there. I hesitated before speaking. You ever get tired of people asking you to fix their lives? He turned his head toward me slowly. What do you mean? I shrugged. Like, everyone calls you when something's broken. But what about when you're the one who's broken? Who fixes you? He was quiet for a moment, studying me like he was trying to see past my words. Sometimes, he said finally, voice low. But I guess I'm used to it. I wanted to ask more. Wanted to know what made him feel broken. Wanted to know if he ever let someone else take care of him the way he took care of everyone else. But I didn't. Instead, I said, you seem like you've got everything figured out. He shook his head. Nah, I just pretend better than most. That surprised me. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something behind his eyes, something softer, something tired. And in that moment, I realized something. I liked being around him not just because he fixed things. I liked being around him because he made me feel less alone. Even if I couldn't say it out loud yet. After that, our conversations changed. They weren't just about broken appliances or daily routines anymore. We talked about music, about movies, about dreams we never told anyone else. He told me about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, where fitting in meant hiding parts of yourself. I nodded like I understood, because I did. One night, we ended up talking until late. The city outside was quiet, the hum of distant traffic barely reaching us through the window. We were sitting close enough that our shoulders touched, and neither of us moved away. He turned to me suddenly, expression unreadable. You know, he said softly, you're different. I blinked. Different how? He smiled, almost shyly. Like, you don't pretend to be someone you're not. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever said something like that to me before. I swallowed, my throat dry. Thanks. He nodded, then added, it's rare. I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered if he could see the way my heart was racing. The silence between us stretched, heavy and soft all at once. Then he stood up, stretching. I should go. I nodded, even though I didn't want him to leave. He paused by the door, hand on the knob, and looked back at me. You sleep okay tonight, yeah? I smiled faintly. I'll try. He gave me one last glance, long, quiet, before stepping out into the night. And as the door closed behind him, I sat back on the couch, heart full of something I couldn't name. Because for the first time, I knew. I liked him, not just as a friend. Not just because he fixed things. I liked him, and I didn't know what that meant. But I wanted to find out. I started noticing things. Little things, the kind you only see when you're paying attention, really paying attention. Like how his eyes crinkled slightly when he smiled, how he hummed to himself while working, how he always made sure I had eaten before he finished his own food when we shared snacks after fixing something. He never said much about himself, but I could feel the weight of something unspoken behind his words, like there were stories he wasn't ready to tell. And I wanted to know them all. He came over more often now, sometimes just to check on things, other times with an excuse that felt a little too convenient. Once, he showed up with a small toolkit and said, "Thought I'd do a quick maintenance round." Better safe than sorry. I raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to do that." He shrugged. "Maybe I just like being here." That line stayed with me long after he left. We fell into a rhythm, him fixing things, me watching him, as talking late into the evening. Sometimes we didn't even talk at all. We'd sit in comfortable silence, the hum of the city outside our only soundtrack. One afternoon, he was replacing a loose light switch in the hallway. I leaned against the wall nearby, watching as he worked with slow, steady hands. His shirt rode up slightly, revealing the edge of his lower back, and I looked away quickly, my face warming. He glanced up at me. "You keep staring like that, and I'm gonna think you're trying to memorize me." I laughed nervously. "Wouldn't that be weird?" He smirked. "Maybe. Or maybe it's not." I swallowed hard, unsure what he meant by that. He stood up after finishing the job and turned to face me fully. "You ever get tired of pretending?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "What?" He tilted his head slightly. "Like, pretending you're okay when you're not. Pretending you don't want something because you're scared to admit it." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Why are you asking me that?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, just a little, just enough for me to feel the warmth of his presence. "I dunno," he said quietly. "Sometimes I wonder if you're hiding something." I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. He studied me for a moment longer, then smiled softly. "Forget I said anything." He walked away, leaving me standing there, breath caught in my throat. Later that night, we sat on the couch again. The air between us felt heavier than usual, like something was pressing down on it, waiting to be acknowledged. He picked up the remote and flipped through channels absentmindedly. "You ever been in love?" he asked casually. I hesitated. "Not really." He nodded slowly. "Me neither." I glanced at him. "Never." He shook his head. "Not the real kind." He paused, then added, "Most people settle for something less. Something safe." I wasn't sure why he was saying this, but it made my chest tighten. "Do you want something real?" I asked before I could stop myself. He turned to look at me, expression unreadable. "Don't you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because yes. Yes, I did. But I didn't know if I was brave enough to reach for it. The next time he touched me, it was different. It was late. We had been watching a movie, the glow of the screen casting soft shadows across the room. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because I woke up to the sound of movement beside me. I blinked open my eyes and saw him still sitting there, close enough that our arms were touching. One of his hands was resting on my thigh, not forceful, not aggressive, just there asterisk. Just warm. I didn't move. I didn't pull away. Because part of me liked it. His thumb moved slightly, brushing against the fabric of my pants. It was such a small gesture, but it sent a shiver through me. "You awake?" he asked softly. I nodded slowly. He didn't remove his hand. Instead, he leaned in slightly, close enough that I could feel his breath near my ear. "You make it hard to stay away from you," he whispered. My heart slammed against my ribs. I should have said something, anything, but I didn't. Instead, I let the moment stretch, let his touch linger, let the quiet understanding between us grow into something deeper. Then, just as suddenly, he pulled away. "Sorry," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I shouldn't have done that." I sat up. Slowly. "Why not?" He looked at me like he was trying to decide whether or not to say what was on his mind. Finally, he said, "Because I don't know if you're ready for this." I swallowed hard. "What if I am?" He studied me for a long moment, then shook his head. "Not tonight." He stood up, grabbed his bag, and headed toward the door. Before stepping out, he paused and looked back at me. "We'll talk about this another time," he said. Then he was gone, and I was left alone with my racing heart, my tangled thoughts, and the undeniable truth that I was falling for him. Hard. I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. You make it hard to stay away from you. Asterisk. It played over and over in my head like a broken record, each time making my stomach twist in a different way, sometimes nervousness, sometimes excitement, sometimes something heavier I couldn't name. He had touched me. Just once. Just briefly. But it was enough to change everything. And now, I didn't know how to act around him. When he came over the next time, I wasn't sure whether to pretend it hadn't happened or ask him what he meant by it. He walked in like always, greeted me with that same calm smile, but this time, I noticed how his eyes lingered on me a little longer before he turned away. We sat on the couch after he fixed the loose door handle, nothing major, just another small thing I probably could have handled myself if I had really tried. But I liked having him here. Liked the way he made everything feel easier, even when things inside me were getting more complicated. He leaned back, stretching his arms along the top of the couch. You've been quiet lately, he said after a while. I glanced at him. Have I? He nodded. Yeah, like you're thinking about something you don't want to say out loud. I swallowed hard. He was right. I looked down at my hands, trying to find the words. About the other night. He tensed slightly, just for a second. Then he exhaled slowly. Yeah, I hesitated. Did you mean it? His gaze met mine, steady and unreadable. Which part? I felt my face warm. The part where you said I make it hard to stay away from me. He was quiet for a long moment, then let out a soft breath. Yeah, I meant it. My heart pounded. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to ask why he pulled away. Why he left me wondering. Why he kept doing this, saying things that made me feel like there was something real between us, only to walk away before I could understand what it meant. Instead, I whispered, then why did you leave? He studied me carefully. Because I didn't want to push you into something you weren't ready for. That surprised me. You think I'm not ready? My voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know, he admitted. I don't know what you want. I looked away, unsure how to answer that. Because truthfully, I didn't fully know either. I knew I liked him. Knew I wanted to be close to him. But there was still a part of me that held back, fear, maybe. Or confusion. Or both. He must have seen the hesitation in my face because he reached out and placed a hand on my arm. I like being around you, he said softly. More than I should, probably. I looked at him again, heart pounding. He continued, but I also know what it's like to feel lost. To not know who you are yet. And I don't want to mess that up for you. I swallowed hard. What if I do know who I am? He gave me a small, knowing smile. Then tell me. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because as much as I wanted to say it, as much as I wanted to admit that I liked him, that I wanted to be with him, the words stuck in my throat. He nodded like he understood. Whenever you're ready. Later that night, after he left, I sat alone in the dim glow of the lamp, replaying the conversation over and over. I wanted to believe that I was ready. That I could just open my mouth and say it out loud. But I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came after. Still, something had changed. He hadn't run away. He hadn't acted like what he felt was a mistake. He had given me space. Had waited for me to catch up. And for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could take that step forward. So the next time he came over, I didn't hesitate. As soon as he walked in, I closed the door behind him and said, I like you. He froze mid-step. I rushed on before I could lose my nerve. I like you, Arjun. A lot. He stared at me for a long moment, expression unreadable. Then he smiled, slow, soft, almost shy. I like you too, he said quietly. A lot. And just like that, everything shifted. He stepped closer, closing the distance between us. His hand found mine, fingers interlacing gently. No rushing, no pressure, just understanding, just connection. And for the first time, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was real. That we were real. We didn't rush into anything. Even after I said it, I like you, we kept things slow. Like we were both afraid that moving too fast would break whatever fragile thing had formed between us. He still came over to fix things, still sat beside me on the couch, still talked late into the night. But now, there was something else in the air. Something unspoken but real. Sometimes he'd reach for my hand without saying anything. Sometimes he'd brush a strand of hair from my face just because he could. And sometimes, when we sat close enough that our shoulders touched, he'd rest his head against mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. It felt good. It felt safe. But it also scared me. Because even though I had admitted how I felt, even though I had taken that step forward, there was still a part of me that hesitated. A part of me that wondered if this was real or if I was just imagining what I wanted to believe. One evening, while fixing the AC unit, he suddenly stopped and turned to me. You ever been with someone before? His voice was casual, but there was something behind his eyes, something careful, like he was testing the ground before stepping forward. I hesitated. Not really. He nodded slowly. Me neither. Not like that. I blinked. You're kidding. He smirked slightly. Why? You think I've got some wild past? I don't know, I admitted. You just seem experienced. He chuckled, shaking his head. That's not the same thing. I studied him for a moment. Then what do you have? He wiped his hands on a rag before sitting beside me. A lot of near misses. A lot of almosts. A few moments I wish I hadn't walked away from. I swallowed hard. What made you walk away? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, fear. I looked at him, surprised. He continued, I used to think being alone was safer than risking getting hurt. That pretending was easier than facing the truth. I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. He glanced at me. What about you? I shrugged. Same, I guess. Always felt like I had to hide parts of myself. Like if I let someone in too deep, they'd see something they didn't like. His expression softened. You don't have to hide with me. I wanted to believe him. I did. But old habits die hard. After that, things started changing between us. Small touches became longer. Conversations ran deeper. We kissed once, just a soft, hesitant press of lips, barely more than a breath, but it left me dizzy. And then came the night everything shifted again. The power went out across the city. No warning, no explanation. Just sudden darkness. I lit a candle, sat on the couch, and waited for it to come back on. Then there was a knock at the door. It was him. Figured you might need company, he said with a small smile. I stepped aside to let him in. We sat together in the dim glow of the candlelight, talking softly, laughing at stupid things, letting the silence stretch comfortably between us. The city outside was quieter than usual, the only sounds coming from distant traffic and the occasional breeze through the window. At some point, he reached over and took my hand. No words. Just warmth. Just connection. And for a while, that was enough. But then he leaned in. His lips found mine again, slower this time. Deeper. More certain. I kissed him back without hesitation. His hand moved to my thigh, firm but gentle. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from something else entirely, something new. Something thrilling. He pulled away just enough to whisper, you okay? I nodded, breathless. Yeah. He smiled faintly. Good. He kissed me again, fingers threading through my hair, pulling me closer. I let him. I wanted him too. For the first time, I wasn't holding back. For the first time, I let myself feel everything. And in that moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, this was what love felt like. But as the night wore on, something changed. He became more insistent, more aggressive, less gentle. I didn't mind at first. I liked the way he touched me, the way he held me like he never wanted to let go. But then he whispered something that made my stomach twist. You've wanted this for a long time, haven't you? I froze. I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure what he meant. Was it a question, or was it a statement? Either way, it made me feel like something inside me cracked. I wanted to say something. To ask him to slow down. To tell him I wasn't ready for this. But the words wouldn't come. And before I could find them, everything blurred into motion. And I let it happen. Because I didn't know how to stop it. Because I told myself this was what I wanted. Because I didn't want to ruin what we had. And later, when it was over, when he lay beside me breathing heavily, when the candle had burned low and the silence between us felt heavier than before, I stared at the ceiling and wondered why I suddenly felt so empty. Because I thought this would make me feel closer to him. Instead, it made me feel like I had lost something I couldn't get back. I didn't know how to feel the next morning. He was gone by the time I woke up, just a note on the coffee table and the lingering scent of his cologne in the air. See you soon, it said. Simple, casual. Like nothing had changed, but everything had. I sat up slowly, wrapping the blanket around my shoulders, staring at the empty space beside me. My body felt sore in ways I wasn't ready to name, and my mind was tangled in something I couldn't quite sort through. Had this been what I wanted? Did I even know what I wanted? I replayed the night over and over in my head, trying to find a moment where I had clearly said yes, not just with silence or hesitation, but with certainty. But all I could remember was the way he had kissed me, the way his hands had moved, the way his voice had dropped low as he whispered those words again. You've wanted this for a long time, haven't you? It hadn't felt like a question. It had felt like an assumption. And I had let it happen anyway. Because I liked him. Because I wanted to believe this was love. Because I didn't know how to say no. I stood up slowly, walking to the bathroom, avoiding my own reflection in the mirror. I turned on the shower and stepped inside, letting the hot water run over my skin, hoping it would wash away the confusion. But it didn't. Later that day, I tried calling him. Just once. Just to hear his voice. But he didn't answer. I told myself it was nothing. That maybe he was busy. That maybe he just needed space. But the days passed, and he never showed up. No visits. No calls. No texts. It was like he had disappeared. And with every passing hour, the emptiness inside me grew heavier. I started questioning everything. Had I misread him? Had I pushed too hard? Was I just another thing he fixed before moving on? I wanted to talk to someone, anyone, but I didn't know where to start. How do you explain something when you don't even understand it yourself? So I stayed quiet. I went to class. I did my work. I smiled when people asked how I was doing. But inside, I was breaking. One evening, Priya texted me. "Hey, are you okay? You seem off lately." Asterisk. I stared at her message for a long time, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed back, "I don't know." Asterisk. She replied almost instantly. "Do you want to talk?" Asterisk. I hesitated. Then I met her at our usual spot, the quiet bench under the tree outside the library. She listened without interrupting as I told her everything. About Arjun. About how close we had become. About how much I had wanted this. And about how, after everything, I still didn't know if I had made the right choice. When I finished, she reached out and took my hand. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said softly. I shook my head. "I didn't stop him." "That doesn't mean you wanted it," she said firmly. "Consent isn't just about saying no. It's about being able to say yes without pressure. Without fear." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so long blaming myself, for not speaking up, for not pushing him away, for letting it happen even when I wasn't sure I was ready. But now, I saw it differently. What happened between us wasn't just about wanting someone. It was about feeling like I didn't have a choice. And that wasn't love. That was something else. Priya stayed with me for a long time after that, just sitting beside me in silence, letting me breathe. When she finally spoke again, her voice was gentle. "You deserve better than this," she said. "You deserve someone who respects your boundaries. Someone who waits for you to be ready. Someone who makes you feel safe." I nodded slowly. I wanted that. I deserved that. But right now, I just felt lost. And I didn't know how to find my way back. The next few weeks were a blur. I avoided places where I thought I might run into him. I stopped answering calls from unknown numbers. I deleted his number from my phone, even though it hurt to do it. One night, I found myself standing outside his shop, Prime Fix, the same one where it all began. The lights were off. The door was locked. I didn't knock. I just stood there for a while, staring at the faded sign above the window. Then I turned and walked away. Because I knew now that whatever this was, it wasn't healing. It was hurting, and I needed to stop pretending otherwise. So I started therapy. Priya helped me find someone through the college health center, a counselor who specialized in trauma and relationships. At first, it was awkward. Sitting in a small room, talking about things I had buried deep inside. But slowly, piece by piece, I started unpacking what had happened. We talked about consent, about boundaries, about how desire doesn't erase the need for permission. And most importantly, we talked about how it wasn't my fault. Some days were still hard. Some nights, I'd wake up from dreams that felt too real, trapped in memories I couldn't escape. I'd flinch at certain touches. I'd feel panic rise unexpectedly, like I was reliving that night all over again. But I kept going. I wrote poems. I recorded voice notes. I found strength in the parts of myself I thought I had lost. And slowly, I started to heal. Not because it was easy. But because I refused to stay broken forever. Because I deserved peace. Because I deserved love that didn't feel like fear. And because I finally understood, what happened to me wasn't love. It was something else entirely. And I was allowed to say that out loud. I still think about him sometimes. Not often. Not like I used to. But there are moments, when I hear a song, or pass by a familiar street, or find myself alone. Late at night, when his face flickers in my mind like an old memory I can't quite erase. But now, when I think of him, it doesn't hurt the way it used to. Now, when I remember what happened, I don't blame myself anymore. I used to replay that night over and over, trying to find a moment where I had clearly said no. Trying to prove to myself that I hadn't invited it somehow. That I hadn't led him on. That I hadn't made it easier for him to cross the line. But I understand now, silence isn't consent. Wanting someone doesn't mean giving up your right to say stop. And love, real love, should never feel like pressure. It took me a long time to separate what I felt for him from what he did to me. For a while, I thought maybe I had imagined it all. That maybe I was just overreacting. That maybe I had wanted it more than I realized. But healing has taught me something different. It taught me that desire doesn't erase boundaries. It taught me that vulnerability shouldn't be taken advantage of. And most importantly, it taught me that I am not weak for hurting, I am strong for surviving. There were days when I didn't want to get out of bed. Days when I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. Days when I wondered if I would ever feel safe again. But I kept going, because even when it felt impossible, I knew I deserved better than fear. I deserved love that was gentle. Love that waited for me. Love that respected my voice. And slowly, I found pieces of myself again. I started writing again, poems, journal entries, little notes I never shared with anyone. It became my way of sorting through everything, of reminding myself that my story didn't end in that room. That I was more than what had been done to me. I met someone. His name is Arian. We met in one of my classes, quiet, kind, always smiling in a way that made me feel seen. He didn't rush me, didn't push me to talk before I was ready. Just sat beside me during lectures, listened when I needed to speak, held my hand when I didn't have words. With him, I learned what real intimacy felt like. Not the kind built on pressure or control, but the kind built on trust, on patience, on mutual respect. For the first time since everything happened, I kissed someone and didn't flinch. I let myself fall asleep beside someone without waking up terrified. I let myself believe that I could be loved, truly loved, without being broken. And it was healing. Still, there were bad days. Sometimes, I'd hear a laugh that sounded too much like his. Or see someone standing too close. And in an instant, the panic would rise again. My breath would hitch. My chest would tighten. I'd have to remind myself, he's not here. You're safe now. Asterisk. But I kept going. Because healing isn't linear. Some days, I felt like I was flying. Other days, I felt like I was drowning. But I kept showing up for myself. Because I deserved that. Because I deserved peace. And because I finally understood, what happened to me wasn't my fault. To Arjun, I don't hate you. Not anymore. But I also won't pretend that what you did was okay. You crossed a line that should never have been crossed. You used the trust I gave you in the worst way possible. And I hope, for both our sakes, that you learn from this. That you seek help. That you understand that wanting someone doesn't give you the right to take from them without permission. And to everyone else, please listen. Please believe. Please don't turn away when someone shares something painful with you. Because silence protects abusers. Silence lets these things keep happening. We need to create spaces where survivors feel safe to speak. Where we don't question their choices, but instead offer support. Where we teach boys and men that consent is not optional. Where we remind each other that love should never feel like fear. This story might end here, but my journey doesn't. I'm still healing, still learning, still finding pieces of myself that I thought were lost forever. But I'm here, and I'm not ashamed. Thank you for listening.